A rancher discovered starving racehorses abandoned at a deserted track and couldn't leave them to die. But 1 week later, a billionaire owner's private army arrives at his property, and what they demand makes his blood run cold. The wind whistled through the abandoned grandstands of Westridge Racing Complex, carrying the desperate whinnies of forgotten champions across the overgrown track. Jack Dawson pulled his weathered truck to a stop at the rusted gates, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the once prestigious racing facility. 6 months ago, this place had been the crown jewel of Kentucky horse racing, hosting Derby contenders and drawing crowds from across the country. Now it stood silent, a monument to greed and financial mismanagement. "You sure about this, Jack?" Tom Wheeler asked from the passenger seat, his voice thick with concern. "We're trespassing on Harrington property. Alexander Harrington isn't exactly known for his forgiveness." Jack's calloused hands tightened around the steering wheel. "I don't give a damn whose property it is. My cousin said there are horses still in there, Tom. Abandoned. Starving." Tom sighed, knowing there was no talking Jack out of this. The 52-year-old rancher had spent his entire life rescuing and rehabilitating horses. His modest 200-acre ranch in Willow Creek was a sanctuary for abused and neglected equines, a passion that had cost him his marriage and nearly bankrupted him more than once. "If there are horses in there, we'll get them out," Jack said, determination hardening his voice. "Legal or not." He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out bolt cutters. The chain securing the gate fell away with a satisfying snap, and Jack pushed the gate open, its hinges groaning in protest. He drove through, heading toward the main stables at the far end of the property. The scene that greeted them as they pulled up to the stable area made Jack's blood run cold. Dozens of thoroughbreds stood in filthy stalls or wandered listlessly around small paddocks. Their ribs protruded sharply against dull, patchy coats. Some had open sores, while others stood with heads hanging low, the fire in their eyes long extinguished by hunger and neglect. "Jesus Christ," Tom whispered, climbing out of the truck. "How long have they been like this?" Jack was already moving, approaching the nearest horse, a once magnificent bay stallion whose racing plates were still attached to hooves that desperately needed trimming. The horse flinched at Jack's approach, but hunger overrode fear, and he stretched his neck toward the rancher, nostrils flaring. "Easy, boy," Jack murmured, slowly extending his hand. "We're here to help." A quick assessment told Jack what he needed to know. These horses, at least 30 of them from what he could see, were severely malnourished and dehydrated, but most could be saved if they acted quickly. "Tom, call Dr. Martinez. Tell her to bring everything she's got and meet us here, then start making calls to everyone at the sanctuary. We're going to need trailers, feed, water, everything." As Tom made the calls, Jack moved methodically from stall to stall, assessing each horse's condition. Some recognized his gentle approach as help and nickered softly. Others, too far gone in their suffering, barely registered his presence. In the last stall, Jack found a sight that broke his already aching heart. A mare lay on her side, her breathing shallow, while a foal, no more than a few weeks old, stood wobbling beside her, trying in vain to nurse. "Hang on, little ones," Jack whispered, kneeling beside the mare. He gently stroked her neck while examining her condition. Severely dehydrated and malnourished, but still fighting. The foal, against all odds, appeared to be in slightly better shape, a testament to the mare's sacrifice of what little strength she had for her baby. Jack rushed back to his truck and returned with a bucket of water and some of the senior feed he always kept on hand. The mare drank greedily while Jack coaxed the foal to try the softened feed mixture. By evening, the rescue operation was in full swing. Dr. Martinez, a veterinarian who had worked with Jack for years, moved efficiently from horse to horse, administering fluids and medications, while Jack's volunteers arrived with trailers and supplies. "Most of them will make it," she told Jack, wiping sweat from her brow. "But they'll need months of rehabilitation. The mare and foal are my biggest concerns, Jack nodded, watching as the first trailer was carefully loaded with the most critical cases. "They're coming to my place, all of them." Dr. Martinez gave him a sharp look. "Jack, that's at least 30 horses. The sanctuary is already at capacity, and the cost of rehabilitating these animals will be astronomical." "I'll figure it out," Jack said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I'm not separating them, and I'm sure as hell not leaving any behind." As night fell, floodlights powered by portable generators illuminated the grim rescue operation. Local news crews had arrived, filming the procession of trailers and the skeletal horses being carefully loaded for transport. Jack avoided the cameras, focusing instead on ensuring each horse was properly secured for the journey to his ranch. The last to be loaded were the mare and her foal. Jack personally supervised their transfer, his heart clenching as volunteers gently carried the weakened mare on a special sling into the trailer. The foal, frightened but surprisingly resilient, followed with less coaxing than expected. "That's the last of them," Tom said, closing the trailer door. "But Jack, we've got company." A black SUV had pulled up to the gates, and 3 men in suits were approaching. The leader, a thin man with a perpetual frown, held up a badge. "Mr. Dawson, I'm Raymond Wells, attorney for Harrington International. You are currently trespassing on private property and removing assets belonging to Mr. Alexander Harrington." Jack stepped forward, positioning himself between the lawyer and the trailer holding the mare and foal. "These horses were abandoned and starving. That's criminal neglect in this state." Wells smiled thinly. "A regrettable oversight in the management transition. Nevertheless, these thoroughbreds represent millions in breeding potential and racing stock. Mr. Harrington expects them returned immediately." "Over my dead body," Jack growled. "These animals were left to die. They're coming with me, and your boss can take it up with the State Animal Welfare Board." The standoff might have escalated if not for the news cameras swinging in their direction. Wells noticed them and visibly recalculated his approach. "This isn't over, Mr. Dawson," he said quietly. "Mr. Harrington protects what belongs to him, and he doesn't take kindly to thieves, even those who think they're heroes." Jack held the man's gaze. "These horses stopped being Harrington's property the moment he abandoned them to starve. Now get out of my way." To Jack's surprise, Wells stepped aside, allowing the last trailer to pass. But the cold smile on the lawyer's face sent a chill down Jack's spine. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The convoy of trailers made its way slowly back to Willow Creek Ranch, where makeshift stalls and paddocks had been hastily prepared for the new arrivals. Jack oversaw the unloading personally, ensuring each horse was settled with fresh water, appropriate feed, and comfortable bedding before moving to the next. The mare and foal were placed in his best stall, the one nearest to the house where he could check on them throughout the night. As Jack spread fresh straw for them, Dr. Martinez approached with an IV bag. "She needs round-the-clock care, Jack," the vet said, hanging the fluids. "I can stay tonight, but after that?" "I'll handle it," Jack replied, gently stroking the mare's dull coat. "What about the others?" "We've got volunteers scheduled in shifts. Everyone's pitching in, but Jack..." She hesitated. "The feed alone for this many horses in their condition will cost a fortune, not to mention the medical supplies." Jack nodded, the weight of what he'd taken on settling fully on his shoulders. His sanctuary operated on donations and whatever he could contribute from his modest savings. 30 additional horses, especially ones requiring intensive rehabilitation, would stretch his resources beyond breaking point. "I'll figure something out," he said again, watching as the foal finally lay down next to his mother, exhausted, but safe. What Jack didn't say was that he had no idea where the money would come from. His small operation was already running on fumes, and the local community, while supportive, had limited resources themselves. As Dr. Martinez left to check on the other horses, Jack sat in the straw beside the mare and foal, his mind racing. He'd mortgaged the ranch to its limit. He had no wealthy benefactors, no corporate sponsors. But looking at the gentle rise and fall of the mare's ribcage and the peaceful sleep of her foal, he knew he'd make the same choice again in a heartbeat. What he didn't know was that across the state, in a glass-walled penthouse overlooking Louisville, Alexander Harrington was watching footage of the rescue on a large screen, his face impassive as Raymond Wells delivered his report. "This nobody rancher has just stolen approximately $40 million worth of bloodstock, sir," Wells concluded. "The media is already painting him as some kind of hero." Harrington, a man whose ruthlessness in business was legendary, took a sip of his scotch before responding. "Find out everything about this Jack Dawson. His finances, his weaknesses, his pressure points. Those horses represent the future of my racing empire, and I want them back." "Yes, sir. And if he refuses?" Harrington's cold eyes fixed on the image of Jack helping the weakened mare to stand. "Then make an example of him. No one takes what belongs to me." Dawn broke over Willow Creek Ranch, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. Jack Dawson had been awake for hours already, moving between stalls with practiced efficiency, checking IVs, administering medications, and ensuring each horse received the specialized feed Dr. Martinez had prescribed. A week of round-the-clock care had produced remarkable improvements in some of the rescued thoroughbreds, while others still teetered on the edge. The mare, whom Jack had named Hope, was among those showing the most promising recovery. Her eyes had regained some spark, and she was now strong enough to stand for longer periods, allowing her foal, dubbed Miracle, to nurse properly. Jack paused at their stall, taking a moment to savor this small victory. "You're a fighter, aren't you, girl?" he murmured, offering Hope a handful of special feed. The mare's soft lips tickled his palm as she accepted the offering, no longer hesitant around humans. "Jack." The urgent call came from the main entrance where Tom Wheeler was hurrying toward him, waving a newspaper. "You need to see this." The front page of the Kentucky Herald featured a large photo of Jack leading one of the skeletal thoroughbreds into a trailer, under the bold headline, "Local Rancher Saves Harrington's Abandoned Champions." "They're calling you a hero," Tom said, scanning the article. "Says here the State Animal Welfare Department is launching an investigation into Harrington International for criminal neglect." Jack handed the paper back with a grunt. "I don't care about being a hero or taking down Harrington. I just want these horses healthy." "Well, you might want to care about this part," Tom replied, pointing to a paragraph near the end. "Harrington's lawyers are filing an emergency petition to have the horses returned immediately. They're claiming the abandonment was just a misunderstanding, that a subcontractor failed to deliver feed and care as arranged." Jack's face darkened. "That's bullshit, and they know it. Those horses were there for weeks without proper care." "Court hearing is set for next month," Tom continued. "Until then, the horses stay here." A month. Jack did the mental calculations quickly. Feed, medications, veterinary care, extra help. They were already burning through cash at an alarming rate. The sanctuary's bank account would be empty long before the hearing. As if reading his mind, Tom added, "Donations have been coming in since the story broke. Not enough to cover everything, but it helps." Jack nodded, grateful but still concerned. "We need to document everything. Their condition when they arrived, treatment plans, daily progress. Harrington's lawyers will try to claim we're not equipped to handle thoroughbreds of this caliber." The sound of tires on gravel interrupted their conversation. A sleek black Cadillac Escalade was rolling up the driveway, looking comically out of place among the mud-splattered trucks and horse trailers that usually populated the ranch. "Speaking of the devil," Tom muttered as Raymond Wells emerged from the driver's seat, impeccably dressed despite the early hour and rural setting. "Mr. Dawson," Wells called, picking his way carefully across the yard, expensive shoes dodging mud puddles. "I was hoping we might have a word in private." Jack crossed his arms. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it right here." Wells glanced at Tom, then shrugged. Very well. Mr. Harrington is prepared to be generous, despite the unauthorized removal of his property. He's willing to compensate you for your time and expenses in caring for the horses, $50,000. To be precise. Jack barked out a laugh. That wouldn't even cover a week of what these horses need. Perhaps, Wells conceded with a thin smile. But it's certainly more than you'd receive if Mr. Harrington pursues legal action for theft and conversion of assets. Those horses represent millions in breeding and racing potential. Those horses represent lives that your boss abandoned, Jack shot back. They were starving to death. Where was Harrington's concern for his assets then? Wells sighed, as if dealing with a particularly slow child. An unfortunate situation that Mr. Harrington deeply regrets. There was a miscommunication with the facility management company during the ownership transition. But that doesn't change the fact that legally, these animals belong to Harrington International. The law also says animals can be seized when there's evidence of neglect or abuse, Tom interjected. Jack did what anyone with a conscience would do. Yes, and Mr. Harrington appreciates Mr. Dawson's humanitarian impulses, Wells said smoothly. Which is why he's willing to be so generous. $100,000, Mr. Dawson. Think of what that could do for your little sanctuary here. Jack took a step closer to Wells, his voice dropping dangerously. Get off my property. Tell Harrington he can bring all the lawyers he wants, but these horses aren't going anywhere. Wells didn't flinch. You're making a serious mistake. Mr. Harrington isn't accustomed to being denied what he wants. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a business card. When you reconsider, and you will, call me. He placed the card on a nearby fence post and turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Dawson? I'd recommend checking your insurance policy. Rural properties like this can be so vulnerable to unfortunate accidents. Jack watched the black Escalade disappear down his driveway, a knot forming in his stomach. He'd made an enemy of one of the most powerful men in Kentucky, perhaps in the entire racing world. He just threatened you, Tom said, picking up the business card and turning it over in his hands. We should call the police. Jack shook his head. And tell them what? That a lawyer made a vague comment about insurance? Men like Harrington don't play by the same rules as the rest of us, Tom. They buy their way out of trouble. The sound of hoofbeats drew their attention to a paddock where one of the stronger rescues, a gleaming black stallion with a white blaze, was trotting with increasing confidence. Despite everything, Jack smiled at the sight. That's why we do this, he said softly. For moments like that. Tom clapped him on the shoulder. You know I'm with you all the way, but we need to be smart about this. Harrington has resources we can't match. Then we'll use what we do have, Jack replied, watching as volunteers arrived for the morning shift. Good people, the truth, and the court of public opinion. Harrington might own judges and politicians, but if enough people are watching, even he has to tread carefully. Throughout the day, Jack threw himself into the work, pushing thoughts of Harrington and legal battles to the back of his mind. He focused instead on each small victory, a horse accepting food from his hand, another standing without assistance for the first time, Miracle the foal, taking wobbling steps around the paddock under his mother's watchful eye. When Dr. Martinez arrived for evening rounds, her assessment confirmed what Jack had observed. They're improving faster than I expected, she said, updating her charts. Especially the stallions. Thoroughbreds are remarkably resilient. What about Hope? Jack asked, nodding toward the mare's stall. Dr. Martinez's expression grew more serious. She gave everything she had to keep that foal alive. Her recovery will be slower, but I'm cautiously optimistic. As darkness fell over the ranch, Jack made one final check of each horse before retreating to his modest farmhouse. The kitchen table had become a makeshift office, covered in veterinary records, donation ledgers, and treatment schedules. He added the day's figures to his calculations and sat back, rubbing his tired eyes. The sanctuary's bank account was draining twice as fast as donations were coming in. At this rate, they'd be broke before the court hearing. Jack briefly considered Wells's offer. $100,000 would provide a cushion, but it wouldn't be nearly enough for the long-term care these horses needed. And more importantly, it would mean surrendering them back to the man who had abandoned them in the first place. Jack was still pondering his limited options when headlights swept across his kitchen window. Expecting Tom or perhaps a volunteer with an emergency, he was surprised to see a sleek sports car he didn't recognize pull up to his house. A woman emerged. Tall, elegantly dressed, with dark hair pulled into a severe bun. Even in the dim porch light, Jack could see she was beautiful in a cold, unapproachable way. She moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to command, striding toward his door without hesitation. Before she could knock, Jack opened it, blocking the entrance with his body. "Can I help you?" he asked, instantly on guard. "Mr. Dawson." Her voice matched her appearance, cultured, precise, and slightly imperious. "My name is Victoria Harrington. I believe you've been dealing with my father's attorney." Jack's eyes narrowed. "If you're here to continue where Wells left off, you're wasting your time." Victoria Harrington's perfect eyebrow arched slightly. "Actually, Mr. Dawson, I'm here to offer you something my father never would." She glanced past him at the humble interior of his home. "May I come in? What I have to propose might be of interest to you, and beneficial to those horses you seem so determined to protect." Jack hesitated, every instinct warning him to send her away. But curiosity won out. He stepped aside, allowing Alexander Harrington's daughter into his home, unaware that this unexpected visit would set in motion events that would change his life forever. Victoria Harrington surveyed Jack's modest kitchen with an unreadable expression. Her designer outfit and perfectly manicured nails seemed wildly out of place among the worn countertops and simple furnishings. Without waiting for an invitation, she settled gracefully into a chair at the cluttered table. "Coffee?" Jack offered, more out of ingrained hospitality than any desire to prolong her visit. "No, thank you." She glanced at the paperwork scattered across the table. "I see you're quite organized in your rescue operation." Jack remained standing, arms crossed. "What do you want, Ms. Harrington? I've already told your father's lawyer those horses aren't going back." Victoria's lips curved into what might have been a smile on anyone else. On her, it looked calculated. "I'm not here on behalf of my father, Mr. Dawson. In fact, he has no idea I'm here." That caught Jack's attention. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her, studying her face for any sign of deception. "Go on." "My father and I have different views on many things," Victoria said carefully, "including the management of our racing operations. The abandonment of those horses was inexcusable, regardless of whose fault it ultimately was." "We agree on something, then," Jack replied, still wary. Victoria nodded. "I've reviewed the veterinary reports filed with the state. Your care for these animals has been exemplary, especially given your limited resources." She opened her sleek leather portfolio and removed a document. "Which brings me to my proposal." She slid the paper across the table. Jack picked it up, skimming the legal language with growing disbelief. "This is a partnership agreement," he said, looking up sharply. "Correct. Harrington Racing would provide full financial support for the rehabilitation of all 36 thoroughbreds. You would continue to oversee their care here at your facility. Once they're healthy, we jointly determine their futures: retirement, rehabilitation for pleasure riding, or in some cases, a return to racing under a reformed management structure that I would personally oversee." Jack's eyes narrowed. "And the catch?" Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched slightly. "The catch, as you put it, is that Harrington Racing retains partial ownership. We share in any future breeding rights or racing purses. Your sanctuary gains financial stability and a powerful ally, while we recover some of our investment and restore our public image. Why would you go behind your father's back with this? Jack asked, suspicion evident in his tone. Why not just wait for the court to order the horses returned? Something flickered across Victoria's composed features. Anger, perhaps, or frustration. Because contrary to what you might think, Mr. Dawson, not everyone in the Harrington family views horses merely as profit centers. I've spent my entire life around thoroughbreds. I understand their value beyond monetary terms. She leaned forward slightly. And because I'm tired of watching my father's outdated methods destroy everything our family has built. This scandal is just the latest in a series of problematic decisions. Jack studied her for a long moment. There was something she wasn't saying. Something beyond concern for horses or family reputation. You're trying to push him out. Victoria's expression remained neutral, but her silence was confirmation enough. This partnership, Jack continued, tapping the document, would give you leverage, public goodwill, a progressive image to contrast with your father's. It would benefit the horses, Victoria countered smoothly, which I thought was your primary concern. Unless your righteous crusade is more important than their welfare? Jack felt his temper flare but kept it in check. These animals aren't pawns in your family power struggle. No, they're living creatures who need expensive care that you can't afford to provide indefinitely. Victoria's tone remained even, but her eyes hardened. Be practical, Mr. Dawson. Your sanctuary's bank account will be empty within weeks. Then what happens to them? The accuracy of her assessment stung. Jack glanced at his financial calculations, wondering how she could know his situation so precisely. You've been investigating me. Victoria inclined her head slightly. Due diligence. Your dedication is admirable, but sentiment won't pay for feed or veterinary care. Jack stood abruptly, needing distance from her cool logic and the uncomfortable truth it contained. He moved to the window, gazing out at the barn where 36 thoroughbreds depended on him for survival. Your father threatened me today, he said finally. Through his lawyer. Victoria sighed. Raymond Wells has all the subtlety of a sledgehammer, another of my father's poor choices. I apologize for his tactics, but they're irrelevant to our discussion. Are they? Jack turned to face her. How do I know this isn't just another approach, the carrot instead of the stick? You don't, Victoria admitted frankly. You'll have to trust me. A bark of laughter escaped Jack. Trust a Harrington? After what I've seen? Victoria rose in one fluid movement, gathering her portfolio. I'm not asking you to trust my family name, Mr. Dawson. I'm asking you to be pragmatic. Review the agreement with your lawyer. The offer stands for 48 hours. She moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. I've arranged for 3 months' worth of specialized feed and supplements to be delivered tomorrow morning. Consider it a gesture of good faith, regardless of your decision. Jack frowned. I didn't agree to anything. The horses need it, Victoria said simply. Whether they remain under your care or eventually return to Harrington facilities, their health is what matters now. With that, she left, the purr of her sports car's engine fading into the night. Jack returned to the table, reading the agreement more carefully this time. The terms were surprisingly fair, almost too fair. Victoria Harrington was offering everything he needed to save these horses, asking only for partial ownership in return. Yet something felt wrong. In his experience, when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. Jack was still pondering the document when his phone rang. Tom's name flashed on the screen. Jack, you need to turn on the news, Tom said without preamble. Channel 7. Jack grabbed the remote and switched on his rarely used television. A polished news anchor was mid-sentence. Shocking developments in the Harrington racing scandal. Sources close to the investigation have revealed that the abandoned thoroughbreds include Northern Star, last year's Kentucky Derby runner-up, and at least 5 other stakes winners, with combined career earnings exceeding $20 million. The screen showed footage of Jack's ranch, including close-ups of several horses. Jack recognized the black stallion with the white blaze, apparently the famous Northern Star himself. The thoroughbreds, valued at over $40 million, are currently being cared for at Willow Creek Ranch, a small horse sanctuary operated by local rancher Jack Dawson. The anchor continued. State officials have confirmed that several of the horses were microchipped and DNA verified as elite racing stock. "Did you know?" Jack asked Tom, stunned by the revelation. "Not until just now," Tom replied. "But it explains why Harrington is so desperate to get them back. These aren't just any thoroughbreds, Jack. They're some of the most valuable horses in racing." Jack's mind raced. This changed everything. No wonder Victoria had appeared on his doorstep with a partnership offer. With horses of this caliber, the breeding rights alone were worth millions. "There's more," Tom said grimly. "I've been making some calls. Rumor has it Harrington's creditors are circling. His racing operation has been losing money for years, and he's leveraged to the hilt. These horses might be his last valuable assets." Jack glanced at the partnership agreement still sitting on his table. Now Victoria's urgency made sense. She wasn't just trying to outmaneuver her father for control of the family business. She was trying to salvage what she could before it collapsed entirely. "I had a visitor tonight," Jack told Tom. "Victoria Harrington. She offered a partnership deal, full financial support for the horses in exchange for shared ownership." Tom whistled low. "Family drama. What are you going to do?" Jack rubbed his tired eyes. "I don't know. I don't trust either of them, but we're running out of options." After hanging up, Jack stepped outside onto his porch. The night was clear, stars scattered across the Kentucky sky like diamond dust. In the distance, he could see the dark shapes of the barn and stables where his regular rescues mingled with Harrington's abandoned champions. Tomorrow, Victoria's feed delivery would arrive. He needed to decide whether to accept it, and by extension, consider her offer, or refuse it and stay firmly opposed to any Harrington involvement. The sound of a vehicle on the gravel drive pulled him from his thoughts. Headlights approached slowly, but this wasn't Victoria returning or Tom coming to continue their conversation. A large black SUV with tinted windows rolled to a stop in front of his house. Jack's hand instinctively moved to his back pocket where he kept his phone. Before he could retrieve it, the driver's door opened, and a tall, imposing figure emerged. Even in the dim porch light, the imperious bearing was unmistakable. Alexander Harrington himself had come to Willow Creek Ranch. Alexander Harrington stepped into the pool of light cast by Jack's porch lamp, his tailored suit as impeccable as his daughter's had been. Unlike Victoria's carefully neutral expression, however, Harrington's face radiated cold fury. He was flanked by 2 men who remained by the vehicle. Security personnel, Jack guessed, noting their alert postures and communicator earpieces. "Dawson." Harrington's voice was deep and commanding, accustomed to immediate obedience. "I see you've made yourself quite the local celebrity at my expense." Jack straightened, instinctively squaring his shoulders. At 6'2", he wasn't used to looking up at many men, but Harrington had a good 2 inches on him, and his presence seemed to fill the space. "Your horses needed help," Jack replied simply. "No one else was providing it." Harrington's mouth twisted in disdain. "Spare me the sanctimonious act. You've stolen property worth millions, and I'm here to give you one chance to return it without the full weight of legal consequences." "They were starving to death," Jack said, anger building beneath his calm exterior. "Your property, your responsibility." "A temporary situation that was being addressed," Harrington dismissed with a wave of his manicured hand. "Those animals represent generations of selective breeding and millions in investment. They belong at Harrington facilities, not some backwater rescue operation run by a man who can barely keep his own affairs solvent." The precision of the insult confirmed Jack's suspicion that both Harringtons had thoroughly investigated him before their visits. If you're so concerned about their welfare, where were you when they were dying in those stalls? Where was your precious investment then? Something dangerous flashed in Harrington's eyes. Careful, Dawson. Men who cross me tend to regret it. Just ask my daughter. Jack frowned. Victoria? Yes, my ambitious offspring appears to have paid you a visit earlier this evening, Harrington said, his tone deceptively casual. One of her little rebellions, no doubt. Whatever she offered you, I'll double it. Cash, right now, no strings attached. You walk away from the horses, the media attention, all of it. Jack studied Harrington's face, seeing the cold calculation behind his confident demeanor. How did you know she was here? A thin smile stretched across Harrington's face. You think I don't monitor my daughter's movements? Victoria's defiance is as predictable as it is futile. She's playing a game she can't win. Something clicked in Jack's mind. You have her followed. I protect my interests, Harrington corrected. Victoria included. Now, my offer, $200,000. Enough to save this little sanctuary of yours and then some. All you have to do is issue a public statement that the horses were never abandoned, that it was all a misunderstanding, and that you're voluntarily returning them to their rightful owner. Jack's jaw tightened. You'd make me out to be either a liar or an opportunist. I'm offering you a dignified exit and financial security, Harrington countered. The alternative is a legal battle you cannot win, followed by financial ruin when I sue you for damages to my reputation and the depreciated value of my horses. Is that what this is really about? Jack asked. Your reputation? Or is it because those horses are the only valuable assets you have left? Harrington's composure slipped for just a second, but it was enough. Jack had struck a nerve. You know nothing about my business affairs, Harrington said, his voice dangerously soft. But I know everything about yours. The second mortgage on this property, the maxed-out credit cards, the donations that barely keep the lights on. How long do you think you can maintain 36 thoroughbreds on that shoestring budget of yours? I'll manage, Jack said, though the financial reality was exactly as Harrington described it. Harrington laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. No, you won't. But I'm a reasonable man. I'll give you until tomorrow to reconsider my offer. After that, things become unpleasant. As if on cue, one of the men by the SUV stepped forward, handing Harrington a thick envelope. Harrington placed it on the porch railing. Documentation of my ownership, cashier's check for $200,000, and a prepared statement for you to sign, Harrington explained. To sweeten the deal, I'll even allow you to keep one of the horses, the mare and foal you seem particularly attached to. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. Jack didn't touch the envelope. And if I refuse? Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then my security team returns tomorrow with a court order and a transport team. Anyone who interferes will be arrested for obstruction. And once the horses are back where they belong, I'll pursue every legal remedy available to me, until this ranch is nothing but a memory. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Dawson, I understand you've been quite the hero to the local media. It would be unfortunate if they were to receive documentation of your financial difficulties. Desperate men sometimes resort to desperate measures. Perhaps you saw those valuable horses as your ticket out of bankruptcy. The implication was clear, and it took every ounce of Jack's self-control not to respond with his fists. Get off my property, Harrington. 24 hours, Harrington replied calmly, returning to his vehicle. Choose wisely. Jack watched the SUV disappear down his driveway, the envelope untouched on his railing. Only when the taillights had vanished did he allow himself to release the breath he'd been holding, his hands shaking with suppressed rage. Inside the house, he called Tom, putting the phone on speaker as he paced the kitchen. He threatened you directly? Tom asked after Jack recounted the visit. More or less. First, Victoria shows up offering partnership, then Daddy Dearest arrives with hush money and threats. Something big is happening with the Harringtons, and these horses are at the center of it. The timing is suspicious, Tom agreed. Victoria visits the same night that news breaks about Northern Star and the other champions being among the rescues. Jack stopped pacing. You think she knew the story was breaking? That she was trying to get ahead of it? Possibly. Or maybe she's genuinely trying to outmaneuver her father. Either way, you're caught in the middle of a billionaire family feud, Jack. That's dangerous territory. Jack rubbed his forehead, exhaustion settling deep in his bones. I need to know more about what's really going on with Harrington International. Victoria mentioned their racing division is struggling, and Alexander practically confirmed it. If they're as financially vulnerable as they seem, maybe we have more leverage than we thought. I have a contact at the Louisville Business Journal, Tom offered. I can make some discreet inquiries. Do it, Jack said. And call Dr. Martinez. I want to accelerate the documentation of the horse's condition, photographs, video, detailed health assessments. If this ends up in court, I want irrefutable evidence of the neglect they suffered. After hanging up, Jack finally picked up the envelope Harrington had left. Inside was exactly what the billionaire had described: ownership papers for all 36 horses, a cashier's check that made Jack's breath catch despite himself, and a typed statement that portrayed the entire incident as a well-intentioned misunderstanding by an overzealous animal lover. Jack placed the papers back in the envelope and set it aside. He wouldn't be intimidated or bought off, but he wasn't naive enough to think he could fight Alexander Harrington with empty pockets and good intentions alone. He stepped outside again, walking the short distance to the main stable. Inside, the horses were settled for the night, their breathing and occasional soft nickering the only sounds in the peaceful darkness. Jack stopped at Hope's stall, where the mare and her foal were resting comfortably. Miracle curled against his mother's side. We'll figure this out, Jack promised quietly, reaching over to stroke Hope's neck. The mare nudged his hand gently, her dark eyes trusting in a way that made his chest ache. As Jack returned to the house, a new determination had taken root. Alexander Harrington might be accustomed to getting what he wanted through intimidation and money, but he had never faced someone with nothing left to lose except his principles. Jack had been fighting uphill battles his entire life, for his sanctuary, for every abused and neglected horse that had crossed his path. This was just one more fight, albeit against a more powerful adversary. What Harrington didn't understand was that Jack Dawson had already lost everything once before: his marriage, his savings, nearly his ranch, and had rebuilt from the ashes. He wasn't afraid of losing it all again if it meant doing what was right. As he finally lay down to catch a few hours of sleep before the next day's challenges, Jack knew one thing with absolute certainty. Alexander Harrington's 24-hour deadline would come and go, and those horses would still be under his protection. Whatever came after, lawsuits, financial ruin, or worse, he would face it head-on. What Jack couldn't know was that events had already been set in motion that would make his confrontation with Alexander Harrington seem like a mere prelude to the storm that was coming. Jack woke before dawn, his sleep interrupted by troubled dreams of Harrington's threats and Victoria's enigmatic offers. He rose with the first hint of light, splashing cold water on his face before heading out to begin the morning feeding routine. As he stepped onto his porch, he found the envelope from Harrington still resting where he'd left it, a tangible reminder of the choice he faced. The morning was quiet, dew glistening on the grass as Jack made his way to the stables. Volunteers wouldn't arrive for another hour, giving him time to check on the horses and gather his thoughts. The peaceful routine of measuring feed, checking water, and inspecting each animal had always been his favorite part of the day, a meditation of sorts before the chaos that typically followed. Hope nickered softly as he approached her stall. The mare was standing more confidently now, and Miracle pranced at her side with increasing strength. Jack offered Hope a carrot, which she took delicately from his palm. "You're looking better every day," he murmured, running his hand along her still protruding ribs. "Just need to put some weight on those bones." The sound of tires on gravel interrupted the moment. Jack checked his watch. Too early for volunteers, and Tom usually texted before coming over. Wary after last night's visits, he made his way to the main yard. 3 large delivery trucks were pulling up, emblazoned with the logo of Kentucky's most prestigious equine nutrition company. The lead driver jumped down from his cab, clipboard in hand. "Willow Creek Ranch?" he called, spotting Jack. "I've got a delivery for Jack Dawson." Jack approached cautiously. "That's me." The driver handed him the clipboard. "Need your signature here. We've got 3 months' worth of specialized feed, supplements, and nutritional support products, all paid for and arranged by Victoria Harrington." Jack hesitated, pen hovering over the signature line. Victoria had mentioned the delivery, but after Alexander's visit, accepting anything from a Harrington felt like a potential trap. "Is there a problem, sir?" the driver asked, checking his watch. "We've got 2 more deliveries after this one." "No problem," Jack decided, signing the form. Whatever game the Harringtons were playing, the horses needed this feed, and he couldn't afford to turn it away on principle. For the next hour, Jack directed the delivery team as they unloaded pallets of high-quality feed, vitamin supplements, and specialized nutritional products, easily tens of thousands of dollars worth of supplies. The timing couldn't have been better. His own feed reserves had been rapidly depleting with 36 additional mouths to feed. As the last truck departed, Tom arrived, eyebrows raising at the mountain of supplies now stacked in Jack's storage barn. "Christmas came early," he remarked, surveying the delivery. "Courtesy of Victoria Harrington," Jack replied, still uncertain about the motivation behind the gift. "Arrived right on schedule, just like she said it would." Tom whistled low. "That's premium stuff, better than what most racing stables use. Looks like she's serious about keeping these horses healthy, at least." "Or setting me up," Jack countered, though with less conviction than before. "Her father showed up last night offering me $200,000 to return the horses and sign a statement, saying it was all a misunderstanding." Tom's eyes widened. "Alexander Harrington himself? Here?" Jack nodded grimly. "Complete with security detail and thinly veiled threats. And you turned him down." "Of course I did. Those horses were abandoned, Tom. They nearly died because of his negligence." Tom ran a hand through his graying hair. "I made those calls last night, like I promised. My contact at the Business Journal didn't want to go on record, but he confirmed Harrington Racing is in serious financial trouble. Apparently, Alexander made some bad investments, took on too much debt, and the racing division has been hemorrhaging money for years." "So Victoria wasn't lying about that part," Jack mused, helping a volunteer unload feed into wheelbarrows. "What about her? Any insights there?" "Victoria Harrington is apparently the operational genius behind what's left of the family empire," Tom explained. "MBA from Wharton, reputation for turning around failing business units. Word is, she's been fighting with her father for control of the racing division for years, but he won't loosen the reins." "Family drama," Jack muttered, "and I'm caught in the middle." "There's more," Tom said, lowering his voice as another volunteer walked past. "My contact mentioned rumors of a potential hostile takeover. A group of investors has been quietly acquiring Harrington International debt, possibly positioning themselves to force Alexander out if he defaults." Jack frowned. "And these thoroughbreds could make the difference between solvency and default." $40 million worth of horseflesh would certainly help his balance sheet, Tom agreed, especially since most of his other assets are reportedly leveraged to the hilt. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Martinez, who took in the delivery with obvious relief. "This is exactly what these horses need," she said, examining the nutritional supplements. especially the competition-grade protein formula. Where did it come from? Victoria Harrington, Jack admitted. She's proposed a partnership, financial support in exchange for shared ownership once the horses recover. Dr. Martinez gave him a sharp look. And her father? Wants them back, no questions asked. Offered me a payoff to walk away. The veterinarian sighed, checking something on her tablet. Well, whoever you end up dealing with, these supplies will accelerate their recovery considerably. I've got the latest assessments. They're all showing improvement, but some faster than others. She showed Jack the tablet, which displayed detailed health metrics for each rescued thoroughbred. Northern Star is recovering particularly well. His racing instincts are strong. I saw him galloping in the paddock yesterday. With proper care, he could potentially race again. Jack processed this information, a new idea forming. So some of these horses could return to competition? Not just survive, but actually compete? Theoretically, yes, Dr. Martinez confirmed. Thoroughbreds are incredibly resilient. With the right rehabilitation program, several of them might return to racing form, though perhaps not at championship levels. Jack thanked her and returned to the feed delivery, helping volunteers organize the supplies while his mind worked through this new perspective. If these horses could race again, could win again, it completely changed the equation. By mid-morning, the ranch was buzzing with activity. Volunteers tended to the horses, media crews filmed from the property line. Jack had refused them closer access, and Dr. Martinez conducted thorough examinations of each animal, documenting their improving conditions. Jack was overseeing the preparation of specialized feed mixes when his phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Dawson, Victoria Harrington's cool voice greeted him. I trust the delivery arrived as scheduled? It did, Jack acknowledged. Thank you. You're welcome, though I notice you haven't responded to my partnership proposal. Jack leaned against the barn door, watching volunteers lead several of the stronger thoroughbreds to the paddocks for exercise. I'm still considering it. Your father paid me a visit last night after you left. A pause. I see. And what did Alexander have to say? He offered me $200,000 to return the horses and sign a statement clearing him of negligence. When I refused, he threatened legal action and financial ruin. Victoria's sigh was barely audible. Typical. My father has always preferred sledgehammers to scalpels. He also mentioned that he has you followed, Jack added, curious about her reaction. Another pause, longer this time. That's unfortunate, but not surprising. Alexander believes in controlling every variable. I've been a difficult variable for him lately. Why are you really doing this, Victoria? Jack asked bluntly. This isn't just about the horses, is it? Does it matter? She countered. My offer benefits the horses and your sanctuary, regardless of my motivations. Jack watched as Northern Star, the prize of the Harrington Racing Stable, trotted proudly around the paddock, his stride growing stronger by the day. Maybe it does matter. I need to know what I'm getting into. Victoria's voice cooled further. Very well. The truth, then. My father is destroying our family legacy through stubborn pride and outdated methods. I've spent years trying to modernize our operations, only to be overruled at every turn. These horses represent our last chance to save Harrington Racing, not for my father, but for the future of the stable. And pushing your father out is just a bonus, Jack suggested. A necessary step, Victoria corrected. Have you made a decision about my offer, Mr. Dawson? Jack thought about the horses, about Harrington's threats, about the sanctuary's precarious finances. Not yet, but I'm working on a counter-proposal, one that might benefit all of us, including the horses. Intriguing, Victoria replied, and for the first time, Jack detected genuine curiosity in her voice. I look forward to hearing it. You have my number. After hanging up, Jack returned to the stables, his mind racing with possibilities. The conversation with Victoria had confirmed what he suspected. The Harrington family power struggle was just as important as the horses themselves in this equation, and that gave him leverage he hadn't previously considered. As noon approached, Tom jogged over from the main gate, his expression urgent. "Jack, we've got company. Black SUVs just pulled up. Looks like Harrington's security team, and they've got horse trailers with them." Jack's 24 hours weren't up yet. Alexander Harrington was making his move early, hoping to catch them unprepared. "Get everyone to the main barn," Jack instructed, already striding toward the entrance. "No one gives up a single horse without a court order." The confrontation he'd been dreading had arrived, but Jack Dawson wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. 6 black SUVs lined up at the entrance to Willow Creek Ranch, gleaming menacingly in the midday sun. Behind them, 3 professional horse transport trailers waited, their Harrington Racing logos prominently displayed. Jack stood at the gate, arms crossed, a hastily assembled group of volunteers and staff flanking him in a determined human barrier. Raymond Wells emerged from the lead vehicle, immaculate as always in his tailored suit. 6 men in tactical gear, private security, Jack guessed, spread out behind the attorney in an intimidation formation. "Mr. Dawson," Wells called, his tone falsely pleasant. "I believe Mr. Harrington made his position quite clear last night. We're here to collect the thoroughbreds." "And I believe I made my position equally clear," Jack replied evenly. "Those horses aren't going anywhere without a court order." Wells smiled thinly, producing a document from his leather portfolio. "As it happens, we have one. Emergency injunction signed by Judge Calloway this morning, granting Harrington International immediate recovery of its property." Jack took the document, scanning it quickly. The legal language was dense, but the order was clear. Harrington had been granted temporary custody of the horses pending a full hearing. "This is bullshit," Tom muttered beside him. "Calloway is in Harrington's pocket. Everyone knows it." Jack handed the paper back to Wells. "This order requires proper animal transport protocols and veterinary supervision. I don't see a vet on your team." Wells's smile faltered slightly. "Our veterinary staff will examine the horses upon arrival at Harrington facilities." "That's not what the order stipulates," Jack countered, having caught that specific clause in his quick reading. "It requires professional veterinary presence during transport, particularly for animals in rehabilitation." Behind them, Dr. Martinez stepped forward. "As the attending veterinarian for these horses, I can confirm that moving them without proper medical supervision would violate both this court order and state animal welfare regulations." Wells's expression hardened. "Our transport team is fully qualified to move healthy horses," Dr. Martinez interrupted. "These animals are recovering from severe neglect and malnutrition. Several require ongoing medical treatment that can't be interrupted." A murmur ran through the assembled volunteers, many of whom had their phones out, recording the confrontation. Jack noticed local news vans pulling up behind the Harrington convoy. Someone had tipped off the media. Wells conferred briefly with one of the security personnel, clearly reassessing the situation. Jack used the moment to address his people. "Stay calm, stay firm," he said quietly. "They're counting on us to lose our cool. Don't give them what they want." Wells approached again, his composure regained. "Very well, Mr. Dawson. We'll arrange for a veterinarian to supervise the transport. In the meantime, my team will begin identifying and preparing the horses for loading." "Your team isn't setting foot on this property," Jack stated flatly. "The court order gives you the right to transport the horses with proper medical supervision. It doesn't authorize you to enter private property against the owner's wishes." Wells's face flushed with anger. "You're obstructing a court order." "I'm protecting these animals as the court order itself requires," Jack corrected. "When you return with a qualified veterinarian who can certify each horse is fit for transport, we can discuss the proper procedures for transferring them. Until then, this conversation is over." The standoff might have escalated if not for the arrival of Sheriff Malone, who parked his cruiser between the two groups and approached with the measured caution of a man who'd diffused many such confrontations in his 20 years of service. "Afternoon, folks," he said, tipping his hat. "Seems we have a situation here." Wells immediately presented the court order. "Sheriff, we have a legal right to recover these animals. Mr. Dawson is obstructing justice." Sheriff Malone read the document carefully, taking his time despite Wells's obvious impatience. "This appears to be in order, except for the veterinary requirement Mr. Dawson mentioned." He looked up at the assembled security team. "I don't see a vet among your people, Mr. Wells." "We're arranging for one as we speak," Wells replied stiffly. The sheriff nodded. "Good. And once they arrive, you'll need to follow proper procedure. Identification of each animal, documentation of their condition before transport, and appropriate loading protocols." He turned to Jack. "You'll cooperate with these requirements, Mr. Dawson?" Jack nodded. "As long as each horse is certified fit for travel by Dr. Martinez, and Harrington's people follow proper handling procedures. Some of these animals are still very fragile." "Seems reasonable," Sheriff Malone concluded. "Mr. Wells, I suggest you contact your veterinarian and return when they're available. Until then, there's not much to be done here." Wells's jaw tightened, but with media cameras rolling and the sheriff present, his options were limited. "We'll be back within the hour, Mr. Dawson. I suggest you use that time to prepare the horses for transport." As the Harrington convoy reluctantly departed, Jack released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Sheriff Malone lingered, watching the vehicles disappear down the road. "You've kicked the hornet's nest this time, Jack," he said, his weathered face concerned. "Alexander Harrington isn't a man who takes defeat graciously, even a temporary one." "I know," Jack acknowledged. "But what was I supposed to do? Let those horses die?" The sheriff shook his head. "You did the right thing. Just be careful. Men like Harrington play by different rules." After the sheriff left, Jack gathered his team in the main barn, away from lingering media crews at the property line. "They'll be back, and next time they'll have a vet with them. We need a plan." "The court order is valid, Jack," Dr. Martinez said reluctantly. "Legally, we can't prevent them from taking the horses. But we can ensure they're transported safely," Jack insisted, "and document everything. If Harrington's people mishandle a single animal, we'll have it on record." Tom pulled Jack aside while the others prepared for the Harrington team's return. "This is just a delaying tactic. We need something bigger if we want to keep these horses." "I know," Jack agreed. "I've been thinking about Victoria's offer. What if we could turn it into something more public? Something Harrington couldn't fight without looking worse than he already does?" Before Tom could respond, Jack's phone rang. "Victoria Harrington." "I hear my father's goons made quite the spectacle at your ranch," she said without preamble. "Subtlety has never been Alexander's strong suit." "They're coming back with a veterinarian," Jack replied. "Your father got an emergency court order." "Judge Calloway," Victoria said knowingly. "He and my father have been golf partners for 20 years. Completely predictable." "I need to know something, Victoria," Jack said, watching volunteers prepare documentation materials for each horse. "If I agree to your partnership proposal, what happens when your father challenges it legally? He clearly has judges in his pocket." Victoria's laugh was crisp and without humor. "Why do you think I offered a partnership instead of trying to buy the horses outright? My father controls most of the Harrington assets, but I have certain legal instruments that give me authority over specific aspects of the racing division. A partnership with your sanctuary for rehabilitative purposes falls within those parameters." "You've been planning this," Jack realized. "Let's just say I've long prepared for the day my father's mismanagement would threaten our racing stock," Victoria replied. "Though I admit, I never anticipated he would literally abandon million-dollar thoroughbreds." Jack made a quick decision. I want to propose an alternative to our private partnership, something more public." "I'm listening," Victoria said, curiosity evident in her voice. "A formal rehabilitation and retraining program," Jack explained, the idea solidifying as he spoke. "Willow Creek and Harrington Racing jointly establish a publicly documented program to rehabilitate these horses. Those that can return to racing do so under reformed management practices that you oversee. Others become the foundation for a therapeutic riding program for veterans and at-risk youth, bearing both our names." The line went silent for a moment. "That's actually quite brilliant, Mr. Dawson. It provides excellent publicity, a viable path forward for the horses, and makes it nearly impossible for my father to object without seeming heartless." "There's one more thing," Jack added. "I want a formal investigation into how these horses ended up abandoned. Not just for accountability, but to ensure it never happens again." "That would implicate my father directly," Victoria said slowly. "Yes," Jack acknowledged. "It would." Another silence, longer this time. "I'll need an hour to consult with my legal team. In the meantime, stall my father's people however you can. Don't let those horses leave your property." The call ended just as Tom rushed over. "They're back, Jack. 2 SUVs just pulled up, and they've got someone in a lab coat with them." Jack pocketed his phone, a new determination filling him. "Let's go greet them. And Tom, tell everyone to be extremely thorough with the documentation. Check and double-check everything. We need to buy some time." The battle for the Harrington horses was entering a new phase, and Jack Dawson was finally playing offense rather than defense. Wells returned with a significantly smaller entourage, just 2 security personnel and a thin, nervous-looking man in his 50s, carrying a veterinary medical bag. The transport trailers remained parked at the end of the driveway, a deliberate reminder of their purpose. "Dr. Howard Preston," Wells introduced the veterinarian with poorly concealed impatience. "Board-certified equine specialist. Now, if you'll allow us to proceed with the identification and transport of Mr. Harrington's property, I'll need to verify Dr. Preston's credentials," Dr. Martinez interrupted smoothly, stepping forward with her tablet, "and review his assessment protocols before any horses are examined." The veterinarian blinked in surprise but produced his credentials. While Dr. Martinez reviewed them, Jack studied the man. Preston's expensive clothes couldn't hide his discomfort. He kept glancing at Wells as if seeking reassurance or direction. "A hired gun," Tom muttered under his breath to Jack. "Probably on Harrington's payroll." Jack nodded slightly. Every moment they delayed was another moment for Victoria to implement whatever counter-strategy she was developing. "Dr. Preston's credentials appear to be in order," Dr. Martinez announced finally. "However, as the veterinarian who's been treating these horses, I'll need to accompany him during each examination and co-sign any transport authorizations." Wells started to object, but Preston spoke first. "That's completely reasonable, and in fact, preferable. I'd appreciate your insights into their current treatment regimens." Wells's jaw tightened at this deviation from his script, but he nodded curtly. "Fine. Let's begin with Northern Star and the other Grade 1 stakes winners. They're our priority." Jack led the group to the main stable, deliberately setting a leisurely pace. Inside, volunteers were already positioned at each stall with documentation clipboards, ready to record every detail of the examination process. "We've prepared comprehensive files for each horse," Jack explained, handing a thick binder to Dr. Preston. "Current weight, vital statistics, medication schedules, dietary requirements, and daily progress notes." Preston accepted the binder, looking somewhat overwhelmed. "This is quite thorough." "These animals nearly died from neglect," Jack reminded him pointedly. "We don't take their care lightly." They approached Northern Star's stall first. The black stallion looked markedly better than he had a week ago, though still far from his racing prime. Preston began his examination while Dr. Martinez observed closely, occasionally asking pointed questions about his assessment methodology. Northern Star's heart rate is slightly elevated, Preston noted, making entries on his form. Is that typical for him in his current condition? It's improved significantly, Dr. Martinez replied. His resting heart rate was dangerously high when he arrived. I have the charts here. She produced yet another document from her seemingly endless supply of paperwork. Jack caught Tom's eye and gave a subtle nod of appreciation. They had discussed this strategy earlier: overwhelm Harrington's vet with documentation and technical questions, making the process as thorough and time-consuming as possible. Wells checked his watch repeatedly as Preston and Martinez conducted a painstaking examination of Northern Star, discussing every finding in exhaustive detail before moving on to the next horse. At this rate, examining all 36 thoroughbreds would take days, not hours. This is deliberately obstructionist, Wells finally snapped after they'd spent 45 minutes on just 3 horses. Dr. Preston needs to complete only a basic fitness for transport assessment, not a comprehensive medical review. The court order specifies that each horse must be certified as stable enough for transport, Jack countered calmly. Given their compromised health, that requires thorough examination. Unless you'd prefer to explain to Judge Calloway why Harrington Racing transported critically ill animals against veterinary recommendation. Wells's face flushed, but he had no immediate rebuttal. Preston, to Jack's surprise, seemed to be taking his role seriously, despite his obvious connection to Harrington, asking detailed questions and making careful notes about each animal's condition. When they reached Hope and Miracle's stall, Preston's professional detachment faltered visibly. The mare still showed clear signs of her ordeal: protruding ribs, dull coat, and the watchful wariness of an animal that had suffered. "This is unacceptable," he murmured, almost to himself. "She's severely malnourished, and the foal—" He turned to Dr. Martinez. "How long were they without proper nutrition?" "Based on their condition upon arrival, at least 3 weeks," Martinez replied. "The mare sacrificed her own body condition to continue nursing the foal." Preston's expression hardened. "I can't authorize transport for either of them. The stress would be potentially fatal, especially for the mare." Wells stepped closer, his voice low and insistent. "Dr. Preston, may I remind you of your obligations to your client?" "My professional obligations are to the animal's welfare," Preston replied, a new firmness in his voice. "And I won't certify these 2 as fit for transport, nor, frankly, many of the others I've seen so far." Jack suppressed a smile as Wells pulled Preston aside for a heated, whispered conversation. Their delaying tactics were working even better than anticipated, with Harrington's own veterinarian now raising objections. The standoff was interrupted by the arrival of another vehicle, a silver Mercedes that Jack recognized immediately. Victoria Harrington had arrived. She emerged from the car looking every inch the corporate executive in a tailored blazer and silk blouse, tablet in hand. Wells broke off his argument with Preston, his expression shifting from anger to wary calculation as she approached. "Ms. Harrington," he greeted her with forced cordiality. "This is unexpected. Your father didn't mention you would be joining the recovery operation." "That's because he doesn't know I'm here," Victoria replied coolly, turning to Jack. "Mr. Dawson, I have a proposal I believe will interest you." She handed him a document folder. "The formal partnership agreement we discussed, with the additional public rehabilitation program specifications." Jack opened the folder, skimming the legal document inside. It appeared to be exactly what they had discussed: a joint rehabilitation initiative between Willow Creek Ranch and Harrington Racing, with provisions for therapeutic riding programs and reformed racing practices. Wells attempted to look over Jack's shoulder. "What is this? Alexander Harrington has not authorized any partnership." "He doesn't need to," Victoria stated flatly. The Harrington Family Trust gives me specific authority over rehabilitation and retirement programs for the racing division. This partnership falls squarely within those parameters. Wells's eyes narrowed. This is a transparent attempt to circumvent your father's legitimate recovery of his property. This is a legitimate business decision to protect valuable assets and rehabilitate Harrington Racing's public image, Victoria countered. Or would you prefer I share with the media my documentation of how these horses came to be abandoned in the first place? The threat hung in the air, clear and potent. Wells glanced at the media van still stationed at the property entrance, then back at Victoria. You're playing a dangerous game, he warned quietly. No, Mr. Wells, I'm ending one, Victoria replied. My father's mismanagement nearly destroyed these magnificent animals, and our family's legacy along with them. This partnership with Willow Creek Ranch represents the best path forward for everyone involved, including the horses. She turned to Dr. Preston, who had been watching the exchange with undisguised fascination. Dr. Preston, as a representative of Harrington Racing's executive management, I'm instructing you to complete your examinations and provide Mr. Dawson with comprehensive care recommendations. The horses will remain here for their rehabilitation under our new joint program. Preston looked between Victoria and Wells, clearly trying to determine the safest professional course. I will need clarification on whose instructions I should be following. Victoria produced another document from her portfolio. Perhaps this will help. A certified copy of the Harrington Family Trust provisions pertaining to the racing division, highlighting my specific authorities. While Wells examined the document with mounting frustration, Jack pulled Victoria aside. Is this going to hold up? Legally, I mean. For now, she murmured. It creates enough complications that my father will need to regroup and develop a new strategy. We've bought these horses some time, which is what they need most. Wells finished reading and handed the document back to Victoria, his expression carefully neutral. I'll need to consult with Mr. Harrington about this development. Of course, Victoria agreed pleasantly. In the meantime, since there's no consensus on transport fitness from the veterinary team, and I've invoked my authority under the family trust, the status quo remains. The horses stay at Willow Creek under the new partnership program until proper legal resolution is achieved. Wells gathered his security team, clearly recognizing that further confrontation would only strengthen Victoria's position, especially with media witnesses. This isn't over, Ms. Harrington. Your father won't take this insubordination lightly. It never is over with Alexander, Victoria replied, an edge of sadness beneath her confident exterior. Give him my regards. As Harrington's team departed, Jack felt a momentary sense of victory, quickly tempered by realism. They had won this round, but Alexander Harrington wasn't a man who accepted defeat. The real battle was just beginning. The partnership between Willow Creek Ranch and Harrington Racing's rehabilitation division made headlines across Kentucky and throughout the racing world. Local news stations ran glowing pieces about the innovative program, featuring footage of recovering thoroughbreds and interviews with Jack about their progress. Victoria's polished corporate messaging perfectly complemented Jack's authentic passion for the horse's welfare, creating a public relations narrative that was difficult to criticize. For 5 days, Jack allowed himself to believe they might have actually succeeded. The horses continued their remarkable recovery, volunteers poured in to help with the rehabilitation program, and donations increased dramatically, easing the sanctuary's financial pressure. Victoria visited daily, bringing equine rehabilitation specialists and additional resources while gradually expanding their joint initiative. Northern Star took a full gallop around the paddock today, Jack told her, as they walked the property on the 5th evening after their partnership began. Dr. Martinez says his blood work is almost back to normal levels. Victoria nodded, making notes on her tablet. Excellent progress. The investors I've spoken with are impressed with the rehabilitation timeline. Several have expressed interest in supporting the therapeutic riding program once it launches. Jack had quickly learned that Victoria never stopped working, never fully relaxed. Even during these walks, which he found himself looking forward to more than he cared to admit, she maintained her professional distance, discussing the horses as both living beings and valuable assets in the same breath. "You know, it wouldn't kill you to just enjoy watching them recover without calculating the return on investment," he commented, not unkindly. Victoria looked up from her tablet, a hint of surprise crossing her features. "This is how I enjoy things, Mr. Dawson. Seeing potential realized, creating systems that work, fixing what's broken." "Call me Jack," he said, not for the first time. "And I get it. I just think you might be missing the best part." "Which is?" she asked, slipping her tablet into her bag. Jack led her to Hope's paddock, where the mare was grazing peacefully, Miracle prancing around her with increasing strength and coordination. The simple joy of watching them just be horses again. Victoria's carefully composed expression softened as she watched the foal attempt a playful buck and tumble comically in the grass, only to spring up and try again. For a moment, Jack glimpsed something beneath her corporate armor, a genuine love for these animals that business calculations couldn't fully explain. "I grew up with horses," she said quietly. "Before Harrington Racing became a commercial empire, before my father's obsession with winning at all costs. My grandfather taught me to ride when I was 4. He used to say that horses can sense whether you see them as partners or possessions." "Smart man," Jack observed. Victoria's expression closed again, the vulnerable moment passing. "He was. My father forced him out of the business when I was 12. Grandfather died 6 months later." The simple statement, delivered without emotion, revealed more about Victoria Harrington than any of their previous conversations. Jack was still processing it when his phone rang. Tom's name flashed on the screen. "Jack, you need to get up to the main gate now," Tom said without preamble, his voice tight with tension. "Harrington's here. Not just his lawyers this time, him personally. And he's brought reinforcements." Victoria must have seen Jack's expression change. "What is it?" "Your father's here," Jack said, already striding toward the front of the property. "Apparently with reinforcements, whatever that means." Victoria kept pace beside him, her heels somehow navigating the uneven ground without difficulty. This was inevitable. Alexander doesn't lose gracefully. When they reached the main entrance, Jack understood Tom's choice of words. Alexander Harrington stood imperiously beside his black Escalade, but he wasn't alone. At least 20 men in tactical gear formed an intimidating perimeter around a convoy of vehicles, including horse trailers and what appeared to be private security SUVs. These weren't just lawyers or transport personnel. They looked like a private military unit. "What the hell is this?" Jack muttered, approaching the gate where Tom and several volunteers had gathered. "Private security contractors," Victoria said grimly. "Ex-military, mostly. My father uses them for high-value asset recovery in countries with less stable legal systems than ours. I never thought he'd deploy them domestically." Alexander spotted them and strode forward, his face a mask of controlled rage. Behind him, Raymond Wells followed with a thick portfolio of documents. "Victoria," Alexander acknowledged coldly before turning to Jack. "Mr. Dawson, your little partnership charade ends today. I have a revised court order from Judge Calloway, superseding any arrangements my daughter may have made without proper authority." Wells handed the documents through the gate. Jack skimmed them quickly, his stomach sinking. The order explicitly invalidated Victoria's partnership agreement, citing her misrepresentation of authority and granting Alexander Harrington immediate recovery rights with necessary force if required. "This is a fabrication," Victoria said, reading over Jack's shoulder. "My authority under the family trust is clear." "Your authority," Alexander countered smoothly, was contingent on your continued employment as Executive Vice President of Harrington International. As of this morning, the board, on my recommendation, voted to terminate your position due to your unauthorized actions and clear conflict of interest. Victoria paled slightly but maintained her composure. The board can't override the family trust provisions. Perhaps not, Alexander agreed, but they can initiate a review of your competency to exercise those provisions. In the meantime, this court order stands. He gestured to his security team. These gentlemen are here to ensure compliance. They're authorized to remove anyone who obstructs the recovery operation. Jack looked back at the documents, then at the small group of volunteers behind him. Good people who had come to help horses, not face off against what amounted to mercenaries. He couldn't put them at risk. I need to consult with my attorney, Jack said firmly. Alexander checked his watch with exaggerated patience. You have 15 minutes, Mr. Dawson. Then my team will enter the property with or without your cooperation. Jack pulled Tom and Victoria aside, out of earshot from the gate. Options? He asked tersely. Limited, Victoria admitted. That order appears legally valid, pending challenge. We could call Sheriff Malone, but even with law enforcement present, they have documentation authorizing their actions. What about the media? Tom suggested. Let the court of public opinion see Harrington sending armed thugs against rescue volunteers. Already on it, Jack confirmed, typing a quick message to his contacts at the local news stations. But it won't stop them legally. Victoria was scrolling rapidly through her phone. I'm reaching out to our corporate counsel, but they may be compromised given my termination. I need independent legal representation. 15 minutes won't be enough, Jack said, watching as Alexander's security team began donning tactical gear. We need to buy more time. He strode back to the gate, facing Alexander directly. Those horses are still recovering. Moving them now could endanger their health, court order or not. Alexander's expression remained coldly confident. Dr. Preston is present and will oversee their transport. The order accounts for proper veterinary protocols. Jack spotted Preston standing uncomfortably by one of the trailers, looking like he wished he were anywhere else. You know this is wrong, Jack pressed. These horses nearly died due to neglect at your facility. Some still aren't stable enough for transport. Your concern is noted, Alexander replied dismissively. But frankly, Mr. Dawson, your opinion on the matter is no longer relevant. When my team enters this property, I suggest you and your people stay out of their way. They're professionals, but accidents happen when people interfere with their work. The threat wasn't even thinly veiled. Jack felt his anger rising but kept it in check. Losing his temper now would only make things worse. Victoria rejoined them, her expression grim but determined. Father, this display of force is unnecessary and will only damage Harrington Racing further when it becomes public. Always the pragmatist, Alexander said, something like disappointment crossing his features. You could have been my successor, Victoria, if you'd just learned to respect authority, particularly mine. Your authority nearly destroyed everything our family built, Victoria replied, her voice low but intense. These horses were starving to death under your management. Alexander's expression hardened. A regrettable situation caused by contractors who have since been terminated. My patience is wearing thin, Victoria. Step aside and allow us to recover our property, or face the consequences alongside your new partner. He glanced dismissively at Jack. Victoria held her father's gaze without flinching. You taught me one valuable lesson, Father. Never back down when you know you're right. Alexander's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, the sound of approaching vehicles drew everyone's attention. 3 news vans were racing up the road toward the standoff, followed closely by Sheriff Malone's cruiser. Looks like we have company, Jack observed with grim satisfaction. Care to explain to the good people of Kentucky why you've brought armed personnel to threaten a horse sanctuary, Mr. Harrington? Alexander's eyes narrowed dangerously. This isn't over, Dawson. Not by a long shot. He turned to his security team. Stand down temporarily. Wells, manage the media situation. As the news crews began setting up cameras and Sheriff Malone approached with a concerned expression. Jack knew they'd only delayed the inevitable. Alexander Harrington had come prepared for war, and he wouldn't retreat for long. The next few hours would determine not just the fate of the horses, but potentially of Willow Creek Ranch itself. The sudden arrival of media crews transformed the standoff at Willow Creek Ranch. Camera operators rushed to capture footage of Alexander Harrington's tactical team, while reporters thrust microphones toward anyone willing to comment. Sheriff Malone positioned his cruiser between the opposing groups, creating an impromptu neutral zone. Mr. Harrington, called a female reporter from Kentucky's largest news station, can you explain why you've brought what appears to be a private military force to a horse sanctuary? Alexander adjusted his expensive suit jacket, instantly shifting into the polished corporate persona he presented to the public. These are licensed security professionals ensuring the safe return of valuable thoroughbreds to their proper facilities. The court has recognized Harrington International's rightful ownership and authorized their recovery. But why the show of force? Another reporter pressed. Are you expecting resistance from the rescue volunteers? Before Alexander could respond, Jack stepped forward. These horses were abandoned and starving to death when we rescued them a week ago. They're still recovering from severe neglect. Mr. Harrington seems more concerned with reclaiming his property than with their welfare. The cameras swung toward Jack, whose work clothes and straightforward manner contrasted sharply with Alexander's corporate polish. The visual dichotomy wasn't lost on the reporters or the viewers watching the live broadcasts across Kentucky. Sheriff Malone approached, his expression grave. Folks, I need everyone to dial this back a few notches. Mr. Harrington, while your court order appears valid, the presence of armed personnel on county roads requires proper authorization, which I don't see here. Wells quickly intervened. Sheriff, our security team is fully licensed and operates within legal parameters. They're here simply to ensure the safe transport of extremely valuable thoroughbreds. Be that as it may, Malone replied evenly, I'm uncomfortable with the current setup. I'd like to see those licensing documents, and I'll need to verify the tactical equipment your team is carrying. This procedural request bought precious time. While Sheriff Malone reviewed documentation with Wells, Victoria pulled Jack aside. This is temporary, she warned in a low voice. My father always has contingency plans. He's already texting someone, probably Judge Calloway or someone else in his pocket. Jack nodded grimly. We need to make this public enough that even his connections can't sweep it under the rug. As if summoned by his words, more vehicles began arriving, not just additional media, but ordinary citizens. Word had spread through the community about the confrontation at Willow Creek Ranch, and people were coming to show support. Families with children, local business owners, fellow ranchers, a crowd was forming behind Jack's volunteers, many carrying hastily made signs with messages like, Save the horses, and Stand with Willow Creek. Among them, Jack spotted Dr. Martinez speaking intently with a distinguished older man he didn't recognize. She caught his eye and waved him over. Jack, this is Dr. William Bradford, president of the Kentucky Thoroughbred Association, she introduced. He heard about what's happening and came immediately. The older man shook Jack's hand firmly. Mr. Dawson, I've been following this situation closely. The abandonment of these horses violated everything our association stands for. The KTA board has convened an emergency session to review Harrington Racing's membership status. This was significant. The KTA was the most prestigious thoroughbred organization in the state, with the power to effect racing privileges and breeding registrations. Dr. Bradford, Victoria said, joining them. Thank you for coming. I've been trying to reach the association for days about the rehabilitation program. Dr. Bradford's expression was grave. Ms. Harrington, I received your proposals. They're precisely the kind of reforms the industry needs. But your father's actions today, he gestured toward the tactical team. This is unprecedented and deeply troubling. Alexander, noticing the conversation, strode over with Wells in tow. William, he greeted the KTA president with forced cordiality. This is a private business matter that's being sensationalized unnecessarily. Private, Dr. Bradford repeated, raising an eyebrow. Alexander, you've brought armed personnel to forcibly remove recovering thoroughbreds from a sanctuary in full view of the public and media. This affects our entire industry's reputation. Alexander's jaw tightened. These horses represent significant investments. I'm exercising my legal right to protect those investments. By threatening a rescue operation with paramilitary force, Dr. Bradford countered. The KTA board will have serious questions about this approach, Alexander. While they argued, Jack noticed movement near the security team. Several men were receiving instructions through their earpieces, taking more aggressive positions around the property perimeter. He caught Tom's eye and tilted his head slightly toward the activity. Tom nodded, understanding the silent communication, and began quietly directing volunteers to move the gathered supporters back to a safer distance. Victoria noticed too. He's going to make a move soon, she murmured. The media presence won't stop him for long. Jack was formulating a response when his phone rang, an unknown number. He answered cautiously. Jack Dawson? A crisp female voice inquired. This is Margaret Chen, attorney with the State Attorney General's office. We've received multiple reports about the situation at your facility, including allegations of animal welfare violations by Harrington International. Jack's pulse quickened. Yes, that's correct. We rescued 36 thoroughbreds from abandonment and starvation at their facility last week. We're particularly interested in documentation of their condition upon rescue, Chen continued. Our office is initiating an investigation into potential criminal neglect charges. Can you provide that documentation immediately? Absolutely, Jack confirmed, hope rising for the first time since Alexander's arrival. We have extensive medical records, photographs, and video from the rescue and subsequent treatment. Excellent. I've just emailed you secure upload instructions. Also, Mr. Dawson, please inform all parties that the Attorney General has filed an emergency stay on any removal of the horses pending our investigation. The document is being transmitted to Sheriff Malone as we speak. After ending the call, Jack approached the sheriff, who was already reviewing something on his tablet. Sheriff, I believe you've received... Just got it, Malone confirmed, looking relieved. State AG's office is stepping in with a stay order, takes precedence over the county court order. Alexander was conferring urgently with Wells when Sheriff Malone approached them. Jack couldn't hear the conversation, but Alexander's expression shifted from confidence to rage as the sheriff explained the situation. Wells was already on his phone, presumably trying to contact Judge Calloway or some other ally. Victoria allowed herself a small smile. The Attorney General isn't in my father's pocket. This changes things significantly. Jack nodded, but remained vigilant. He still has armed men surrounding my property. I don't think he's giving up yet. His concern proved justified. After a heated discussion with Wells and Sheriff Malone, Alexander marched back toward his security team, issuing rapid instructions. Rather than standing down, the tactical personnel began spreading out more widely around the property. What's he doing? Tom asked, rejoining Jack. The AG's stay is legally binding. Looking for another angle of attack, Victoria said grimly. My father never accepts defeat. If he can't take the horses legally right now, he'll find another way to assert control. Sheriff Malone approached, his expression troubled. Mr. Dawson, I've informed Mr. Harrington about the AG's stay order. but he's refusing to remove his security team from the perimeter of your property. They're technically on the public easement, not trespassing, so there's limited action I can take to remove them. They're trying to intimidate us, Jack realized. Keep everyone afraid while they look for legal loopholes. Or create an incident that gives them an excuse to intervene, Victoria added. It's a tactic my father has used in other contexts. Provoke a confrontation, then claim they were responding to aggression. As if to confirm her assessment, the security team began videotaping everyone at the ranch, focusing particularly on the volunteers caring for the horses. The psychological pressure was obvious. They were looking for mistakes, for any excuse to claim the horses weren't receiving proper care. Dr. Bradford, who had been observing the situation with increasing concern, stepped forward. This has gone far enough. I'm calling an emergency press conference on behalf of the KTA. The racing community needs to take a stand against these intimidation tactics. As media attention intensified and public support continued to grow, Jack realized they were reaching a critical juncture. Alexander Harrington had the resources and determination to maintain this siege indefinitely. Something had to break the stalemate. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Preston, who had been standing uncomfortably by the horse trailers throughout the confrontation, suddenly approached Sheriff Malone, a folder clutched in his hands. "Sheriff," he said, loud enough for nearby reporters to hear, "I need to make a formal statement regarding the condition of these horses and the circumstances of their abandonment." All eyes turned to the veterinarian as he continued, his voice growing stronger. "I have documentation that contradicts Mr. Harrington's claims about the horses' neglect being a contractor error. As Harrington Racing's veterinarian of record, I can no longer in good conscience remain silent about what really happened." Alexander Harrington's face drained of color as his own veterinarian prepared to publicly contradict his carefully constructed narrative. The balance of power had just shifted dramatically, and everyone present knew it. A hush fell over the crowd as Dr. Preston opened his folder. Alexander Harrington stepped forward, his voice low and menacing. "Preston, remember your confidentiality agreement. One word and you'll never work in this industry again." The veterinarian hesitated, visibly conflicted, but Sheriff Malone moved between them. "That sounded remarkably like witness intimidation, Mr. Harrington. Dr. Preston, please continue." Preston straightened his shoulders, finding resolve. 3 months ago, I submitted a comprehensive report to Mr. Harrington detailing critical health issues at the West Ridge facility. The ventilation system was failing, feed quality had been downgraded to cut costs, and staffing had been reduced below minimum requirements for proper care. He handed the folder to Sheriff Malone. "These are copies of my reports, along with Mr. Harrington's signed directives rejecting the recommended improvements. He specifically ordered continued training regimens for horses I had placed on medical restriction, leading to several injuries. When financial pressures intensified, he directed staff reductions at Westridge, knowing it would leave insufficient personnel for basic care." Reporters pressed closer, cameras rolling as Preston continued. "The abandonment wasn't a contractor error or a miscommunication. It was the culmination of months of deliberate cost-cutting and neglect, prioritizing financial considerations over animal welfare." Alexander's face contorted with rage. "You sanctimonious fool. You've just ended your career." "Perhaps," Preston acknowledged, "but I can at least look at myself in the mirror tomorrow." Sheriff Malone reviewed the documents with growing concern. "Dr. Preston, would you be willing to provide a formal statement for the Attorney General's investigation?" "Yes," Preston replied, avoiding Alexander's burning glare. "These animals deserved better. The racing industry deserves better." As the implications of Preston's revelations rippled through the gathered crowd, Victoria stepped forward to address the media. "As a Harrington, I must take responsibility for what happened to these horses under our company's care," she stated clearly. "Every inch the corporate executive, despite her father's attempts to strip her of authority. The partnership with Willow Creek Ranch represents our commitment to rehabilitation and reform. I pledge that Harrington Racing will emerge from this crisis with new protocols, transparent practices, and an unwavering commitment to animal welfare. Alexander moved toward her, fury radiating from every pore, but Victoria stood her ground. "It's over, Father. The truth is out. The best thing you can do now is step back and let me salvage what remains of our family legacy." For a tense moment, it seemed Alexander might physically confront his daughter. Instead, he turned abruptly to Wells. "Get the security team back to their vehicles. We're leaving." "Sir," Wells began cautiously, "perhaps we should—" "Now!" Alexander barked, already striding toward his Escalade. As Harrington's private army began to withdraw, the atmosphere at Willow Creek visibly shifted. Volunteers embraced, supporters cheered, and reporters scrambled to capture the dramatic resolution for their evening broadcasts. Sheriff Malone approached Jack, looking both relieved and concerned. "This isn't entirely over, Mr. Dawson. The AG's stay is temporary, pending investigation. There will be hearings, possibly criminal charges against Harrington, and the ownership of the horses remains legally complex." "I understand," Jack acknowledged. "But at least they're safe today." Victoria joined them, her professional composure finally showing cracks of exhaustion. "My father won't give up easily. He still controls significant company resources and has influential connections. But now he's fighting public opinion and a state investigation," Jack pointed out. "That changes the playing field considerably." As the crowd gradually dispersed and the immediate crisis subsided, Jack led Victoria toward the main barn, away from the cameras and curious onlookers. They walked in companionable silence until reaching Hope's stall, where the mare greeted them with a soft nicker, Miracle nursing contentedly at her side. "They're the reason for all of this," Jack said quietly. "Not Northern Star or the racing champions, but these two. A mother who sacrificed everything for her baby, and a foal who refused to give up." Victoria watched them thoughtfully. "I've been calculating value in all the wrong metrics," she admitted. "Racing potential, breeding rights, publicity value. But you've been focused on the only value that truly matters." "Life," Jack agreed simply. "The right to live without suffering, to be treated with dignity and compassion." Victoria's carefully maintained facade finally crumbled, revealing genuine emotion beneath. "My grandfather would have been ashamed of what our racing operation became under my father's management. He loved these animals for themselves, not just for what they could earn." "It's not too late to restore that legacy," Jack said. "Your partnership proposal, the rehabilitation program, the therapeutic riding initiative, that's a foundation worth building on." Hope nudged Victoria's shoulder gently, as if endorsing Jack's words. Victoria reached up to stroke the mare's neck, a small smile softening her features. "It won't be easy," she warned. "Even with today's revelations, my father retains significant control over Harrington International. The board won't remove him without a prolonged fight, which means our partnership exists in a legal gray area until ownership is fully resolved." "I've never been afraid of a fight," Jack replied, "especially one worth winning." The days that followed brought both challenges and unexpected developments. The Attorney General's investigation expanded rapidly, with Preston's documentation providing a roadmap to Harrington Racing's systematic animal welfare violations. Additional veterinarians and former employees came forward with corroborating accounts, strengthening the case against Alexander. The Kentucky Thoroughbred Association publicly suspended Harrington Racing's membership pending the investigation outcomes, a devastating blow to Alexander's standing in the racing community. Financial fallout was swift, with sponsors withdrawing support and breeding contracts canceled. Media coverage remained intense, but the narrative had shifted dramatically. Jack and Victoria's partnership became the positive counterpoint to Alexander's disgrace, a story of redemption and reform that resonated with the public. Donations poured into the rehabilitation program, ensuring the horses would receive the best possible care regardless of legal outcomes. 2 weeks after the confrontation at Willow Creek, Jack arrived at the ranch before dawn to find Victoria already there, watching Northern Star trot confidently around the paddock in the early morning light. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, offering her a cup of coffee from the thermos he'd brought. She accepted gratefully. "Board meeting yesterday. They've placed my father on administrative leave pending the investigation results, but stopped short of removing him entirely." "Progress," Jack noted. "Slow, but progress." Victoria nodded. "The partnership agreement has been formally recognized by the interim management team. Willow Creek is now officially the rehabilitation and retraining center for all Harrington thoroughbreds." The significance of this victory wasn't lost on Jack. Whatever happened with Alexander personally, the horses would remain protected under their joint program. "There's something else," Victoria continued, her business-like tone softening slightly. "I've been reviewing the family trust documents with independent counsel. My grandfather included provisions I wasn't previously aware of. Specific ethical standards for the treatment of horses under Harrington care, with enforcement mechanisms if those standards were violated." "Let me guess," Jack said. "Your father kept those provisions quiet." "Buried them completely," Victoria confirmed. "But they're legally binding and provide the foundation for permanent reforms, regardless of who ultimately controls the company." The sun crested the horizon, bathing the ranch in golden light as Hope and Miracle emerged from the stable for their morning exercise. The mare's condition had improved dramatically, her coat now glossy, her gait stronger, her eyes bright with returning health. Miracle gamboled beside her, the picture of flourishing new life. "Look at them," Jack said softly. "A week ago they were barely surviving. Now they're thriving." Victoria watched the pair with unguarded appreciation. "They remind me why I fought so hard all these years, not for control or power, but for what racing could and should be. Ethical, compassionate, worthy of these magnificent animals." Jack studied her profile, seeing beyond the corporate executive to the person beneath, someone who, like him, had dedicated her life to a purpose greater than herself. "What happens now?" he asked. Victoria turned to face him, her expression more open than he'd ever seen it. "We build something better. Together." In that moment, as dawn broke over Willow Creek Ranch and the rescued thoroughbreds began another day of healing and renewal, Jack Dawson understood that he'd gained far more than he'd risked. In saving these horses, he'd found not just purpose and vindication, but unexpected alliance and perhaps something more with the most unlikely of partners. Hope nickered softly from the paddock, as if approving the path ahead. Jack and Victoria walked toward her together, stepping into a future neither could have imagined just 2 weeks before. A future built on the simple, powerful truth that compassion could triumph over greed, and that even the most broken systems could be healed with enough courage and determination. The battle for the Harrington horses had changed everything, not just for the animals themselves, but for the humans who had fought to protect them. And in that change lay the promise of something extraordinary. A new beginning, born from the ashes of abandonment and neglect, a testament to the resilience of all living beings when given the chance to recover, to heal, and ultimately, to thrive.